Affordable housing, job opportunities, gorgeous countryside, wide open spaces. Northern and rural Ontario have a good story to tell. But every year, as more than 100,000 newcomers land in Ontario looking for a fresh start, they mostly don't seize the prospects outside the southern urbanized parts of the province. Joining us to consider why they should, we welcome in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario via Skype, Christian Provenzano. He is the mayor of Sault Ste. Marie. And here in our studio, Gemma Mendez-Smith, Executive Director, 4 County Labour Market Planning Board. That serves Grey, Bruce, Huron, and Perth counties. Charles Sirtwill, President and CEO of the Northern Policy Institute. And Wayne Caldwell, Professor of the School of Environmental Design and Rural Development at the University of Guelph. And it's good to have you folks here in the studio with us. Your Worship, on the line from the Soo. Great to have you with us as well. I want to just put some stats on the record here. We're going to put these up just so folks get a sense of our discussion here today. Putting down roots in Ontario. Only about 5,000 of approximately 113,000 annual newcomers to Ontario make their new homes outside of the large urban areas. In 2015, more than 90% of Ontario immigrants settled in Toronto, Ottawa-Gatineau, Hamilton, Kitchener-Waterloo, London, or Windsor. Only 2.8% of immigrants reside in Ontario's rural areas. And let's do a little more on this, shall we? Let's keep going here. Population projections for 2011 to 2025 show that Ontario's rural population will continue to decline from north of 1 million to just north of 900,000 people. Population is aging and young working age adults are leaving for urban areas. Northern Ontario needs 150,000 newcomers to prevent population shortfalls by the year 2041. And among those newcomers, they need 75,000 workers to fill the workforce shortage by 2041. What does that mean? It means they need to bring in an average of 6,000 people per year starting this year. 6,000 for the next 25 years to prevent the shortage. In 2015, they attracted only 511 immigrants. So you get the sense of what's going on here right now. Charles, to you first. Your think tank crunched a lot of these numbers. Give us a sense of how dire you think the situation is.
Well, I think if we want to continue to have the communities that we have and the capacity to pay the taxes, deliver the services, we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about education. The simple fact is that we need fundamental changes, and we need them about 10 years ago. And right now, when you have this conversation with those who make the policies, whether they're in Ottawa or whether they're in Queen's Park, you don't get a very positive response.
Meaning what?
Meaning that, for the most part, immigration policy in Canada is focused on the exact places where you say immigrants are going. They're focused on the large urban centers. They're focused on the challenges that are being created there in terms of underemployment, unemployment, lack of cultural services, lack of settlement. And that's fair, because we've got literally hundreds of thousands of people in those communities who need those kind of supports.
I want to get a sense, Your Worship, let me go to you in the Soo, about what jobs you think there are that are wanting or are vacant in the north, currently not being held because there's inadequate population.
Yeah, look, Charles makes a really good and important point, and I want to just give you an example about Sault Ste. Marie. Just in my community alone, we estimate that we will need 11,000 people to migrate to Sault Ste. Marie. So whether they're the people migrating back or they're immigrants, to maintain our current population levels and activity levels between now and 2026. So when you're talking about which jobs are open, there are all kinds of opportunities, and we're not looking for just significantly, one type of opportunity. We're having problems in Northern Ontario, from minimum wage labor jobs to professional jobs. So there are opportunities here. Those opportunities are going to become more significant. We're also seeing small business owners having a hard time with succession planning and transitioning their small businesses, because the population just isn't there to support them or to have those young entrepreneurs coming up to buy businesses. So this is a significant problem across the province. And if we don't pay attention to what's happening in the regions, particularly my focus is Northern Ontario, we're going to have some major population issues. I think the most recent data that the province has put out shows that we're going to have a significant population decline from 2016 to 2041. And we have infrastructure here that's open. We have opportunities here that are open. But we really need, as Charles suggested, some real significant policy shifts at the provincial and federal levels.
Okay, hold that thought, Mr. Mayor, because we want to lay out the problem first, and then we'll get to some potential solutions later in our discussion. which incidentally is not an academic discussion for you. You have lived this, Gemma, right?
Absolutely.
So let's tell a bit of your story. When did you first come to Canada?
I came to Canada in 1987.
87.
Yes.
Okay, so it's like 30 years already.
Yes,
And where did
absolutely.
Coming from where?
Coming from Trinidad and Tobago.
And why?
Why? At a young age, I decided I needed to see what my life can offer. And my parents said, okay, let's just send you to Canada. My uncle lived here.
Send you?
and-
Oh, so they did not come with?
No. I came on my own, and then the opportunity of being a live-in nanny came up, and so that's what I did when I first came to Canada.
In what city?
In Toronto.
So you first came to the big city?
Yes, absolutely.
And where are you now?
I'm in a town called It's a village, actually, not even a town. It's a village of Teeswater with a population of 950 people currently.
You moved from a city of 2.5 million to a hamlet, I guess,
Yes.
of fewer than 1,000.
Yes.
Why?
Well, after my husband and I got married, about 10 years into our marriage, 3 children later, we thought we really didn't want to be in the city. We wanted to be in the country. And growing up in a West Indian island, I did grow up in a village, and so it meant that we were familiar with, transportation and all of those ideas. So we really wanted to move to the country to live. And then as we moved there, we loved being there, but certainly it brought its own challenges.
What, immigrants overwhelmingly, obviously, as we've pointed out, stay in cities. What is the lure of the city that keeps them there that apparently wasn't strong enough to keep you there?
Well, I think the lure is maybe they don't know about the rural communities, and I think that would be the first thing. And just being able to know that it exists. And when my brother is now here, and I'm really happy to have immediate family here now.
Here meaning where?
Here in Canada.
But not in Teesdale.
Not in Teeswater.
Teeswater,
but
I should
he's
say.
still in a small town.
Okay.
And it's because he came to Teeswater first.
Okay.
But, just being able to have him come to Canada, and that's one of the things we talked about. When he came to Canada, he would not have settled in where he lives right now had he not moved in with us to experience rural Canada and be able to say, this is a great place to be. And so he has settled in a small town, and he loves being there.
Wayne, what are some of the factors that you think, again, prevent people from experimenting with rural Ontario and keep them in the cities?
I think there's a number of things. I think people are often attracted to places where there are other people that may share the same backgrounds, and that often draws people to large urban centers where there tends to be a large population. There's a perception, often mistaken, that there might not be the same employment opportunities in Ontario. And I think we've heard earlier that there really are great opportunities for employment in rural Ontario. I think those are two of the main driving factors.
Your Worship, tell me some of the reasons that you hear when you try to make the case for Sault Ste. Marie as to why people aren't necessarily that keen to move there.
Well, I think a lot of what we see is that a lot of immigrants are comfortable immigrating to where there's already an existing cultural group. And I think you can see that in Sault Ste. Marie at the turn of the 20th century. There was a lot of Italian immigration. When the steel plant opened, a lot of Italians came over to work as laborers, and Italians followed the Italians over. So I think a lot of what you see is when the immigrants come, they naturally migrate towards their cultural communities. But I think, and the point was made earlier, and Gemma made the point, and I think it's an important one, is that you don't know what you don't know. And you don't know what the smaller communities are going to be like. And you don't recognize that there are opportunities, and you don't recognize that they are culturally accepting. And you don't maybe recognize also that the cost of living is going to be a lot lower in the smaller communities. I don't know how you would ever possibly get into the housing market in the GTHA as an immigrant or just as a young professional starting out. But you can certainly get in the housing market in North Bay or Sudbury or Sault Ste. Marie or any of the other smaller communities between really quickly. So I think part of it is telling our story, and we have a responsibility as communities to tell our stories effectively and to get out there and sell ourselves. And when we do, when people come and have the experience, we have a very positive uptake, and we have people, once they're here and see the benefits of being in Northern Ontario, they often stay, but they have to have that option.
You go first.
Okay.
Go ahead,
I did want to jump in on one of those topics, and it's about so when my brother came to Canada, I was able to experience his entering Canada very differently. I came in as a visitor, I applied to be a worker here, and then I stayed and then applied, went through that process. He came as a landed immigrant, and in the airport, he was given a red bag. And of course, I was curious to find out what is he getting in that red bag. And all the advertisement, everything led to and pointed to the GTHA. And so right away I started thinking, in our rural communities, we're missing the opportunity of telling our story in that red bag.
You got to get in that red
We
bag.
need to get in the red bag. And I told him that about 7 or 8 years ago, almost, when he came here. And that's one of the things that I saw immediately lacking. I was already living in Teeswater, working on workforce development issues, and that's where we saw that our rural communities are doing ourselves a disservice by not telling our story.
Charles.
So there was two things as part of the earlier conversation that kind of jumped out at me as mistakes that northern and rural communities make. And the first one is to say that immigrants aren't enthusiastic about our communities. I think that's a mistake. I think when we talk to immigrants about our communities, when they become aware, there's a high level of enthusiasm. So let's not kind of characterize it as it's an unpleasant place or an unattractive place to immigrants. I think, as the point was made earlier, the real problem is there's simply a total lack of awareness in large part.
You've got to make the case.
And when we get on their radar screen, when they actually consider us, they get very enthusiastic.
Well, Wayne, let's hit something right on the head here, okay? I mean, you can tell me if it's a misimpression, but there may be an impression out there that for racialized communities, for visible minorities, rural and northern Ontario is a tougher place to live than, say, in the bigger cities. True or false?
It depends. I would say that there are people that would perceive that, and I think there are some things in large urban centers provide a range of services that many rural communities are more challenged to provide in terms of helping new immigrants to become integrated within the community, to be aware of the employment opportunities that might be there. But there are many rural communities that do a fantastic job of trying to do that really well. And I think there's some really successful examples. We've done research looking at examples, for example, from Oxford County, Perth County are two communities that we've seen do some really interesting things in working with the communities to try to make people feel welcome, help them find employment opportunities, English as a second language, that range of services that newcomers to communities often are looking for.
You know I want to ask you this question. So tell me, have you run into any racism in your part of the province?
Absolutely. And I think it wasn't a thought when we moved into the area. Never did we think about that as something that would happen. But in the school, when we moved to the rural community, our children were young, and so they entered the school, and they had their issues. It's really interesting. My son, we just showed him a picture of Dad when he first came to Canada. So my husband came when he was about 10 or 11, and it was his grade 5 picture. And my son said, "Oh, I see Dad's had the similar challenges," because Dad was the only child of color in his class. And it was very interesting.
And your kids were too?
Yes, they still actually, our daughter actually maybe have one other ethnic friend in her class. And not so long ago, when our, third child went into high school, I was worried about my daughter. I was really worried about her being in the class because in that school, only because there had been mentions of, don't play with the brown girl and things like that. So
What? Who said that?
children in the school.
Children would say, don't play with the brown girl.
Don't play with the brown girl. And we had a conversation, my husband and I, about should we homeschool? Should we look at moving? Should we change her school? And we decided we weren't going to do that. Our daughter is very resilient. She's 13 and she's a wonderful young lady growing up, and she speaks up for herself, which is really nice. And I think that's the resilience that can be built. But it's tough as a parent. We asked ourselves over the years, did we make the right decision? We love where we are. We have integrated ourselves into the community, but we recognize now that our children did have some struggles.
Let's not pretend that doesn't occur in large urban centers.
You're reading my mind. I just was about to say, let's state the obvious. Racism is everywhere, and we shouldn't give the impression that it's only in rural or northern parts of the province. We're sitting here in the biggest city in the country, and of course, there's racism in this city as well. Your Worship, I want you to weigh in on that too, if you would, because Sault Ste. Marie has had its troubles with those kinds of issues in the past. Is it a problem today?
Yeah, look, I want to recognize and acknowledge Gemma's experiences and be respectful of them. I have lived in, obviously, Sault Ste. Marie most of my life, but I've also lived in Kitchener-Waterloo, I've lived in Toronto, I've lived in Halifax, and I've lived in Ottawa. And I've traveled everywhere in this country with the exception of Newfoundland, which I hope to get to soon. In my feeling and experience, the ignorance and the racism exists everywhere. And it's a problem that we all have to contend with. I'm really proud of where my community has evolved to and where it's come to. We've had recently well over 100 Syrian refugees come into this community, and the way they've been embraced by the community has been really heartening. I think part of our job, Charles, and for those of us that are in Northern Ontario, is we have to obviously sell and communicate. We have to get in the red bag. but we also have to be welcoming. We have to, in a sincere, real way, be welcoming. And I frankly think you're seeing that. And I think you're seeing a lot of growth and evolution in the small city centers, in the urban areas, and the rural areas. And the more immigration and migration that we receive, the more you'll see that. So I certainly don't have any feeling that my community in the north, where I've spent most of my life, is any different than or has any more larger prevalence or any more larger significance of ignorant activities than you've seen in other cities, larger city centers that I've lived in.
Wayne.
And I think we also have to appreciate that the change that we're inviting rural communities to go through to deal with the challenges that they face with declining population and the need for new immigrants. I grew up on a farm in Huron County in the 1960s, and I often reflect, I wonder when it was that I first met in person someone of color for the first time, right? How old was I? And just as Gemma has shared with us in terms of her children going through school without being a single person in that context, for many people growing up in rural Ontario, decades ago, there wasn't any diversity, if I might. And it asks us to make those changes, and it's an important challenge for us to deal with.
Well, we've laid out what the issues are now and what the challenges are, and now we want to, I think, get some solutions on the table, or as you put it, figure out how to get inside that red bag at the airport. So, who's going to start it off? Why don't you start it off here, Charles? What are the things that people should know about rural and northern Ontario that would make the lifestyle there particularly attractive?
Well, number one, for $440,000, you can buy yourself a 900 square foot condo here in beautiful Toronto, or for $440,000 in Thunder Bay, where I live, you could get yourself a 3-bedroom house, 3 baths, nice parking lot, parking driveway for yourself, nice yard, 5 minutes from the local school, 5 minutes from the local hospital, and an indie music scene that's second to none in the country.
No kidding.
How's that?
That's not bad.
That's not a bad sales pitch.
That hospital is a $450 million hospital, too.
Beautiful hospital.
They call it the Taj Mahal Hospital, I think.
Well, be careful.
No, it's, I've seen it. It's impressive.
Wonderful services, and you don't have to just go to Thunder Bay to get that kind of medical care. There's a community called Sioux Lookout, has a wonderful brand new hospital, very cultural sensitive, tied into the Indigenous culture that's around there, and as a result, it's welcoming to all kinds of different types of people. It's very diverse, and it's a place where everybody can feel comfortable. And that's something that, as a newcomer to the north myself, I was from Halifax when I moved to Thunder Bay 4.5 years ago. I've experienced it in small, medium, and large communities across the north.
The Persians taste pretty good too, don't they?
Now, see, you're going to get me in trouble because I'm not a big fan of the Persians.
Come on.
But anyway.
That is the best food in the world.
I guess I have a responsibility as somebody from Thunder Bay to go, yay, Persians. For those of you who are not familiar, the Persian is a wonderful, if you like icing, that's the perfect opportunity for you.
That is exactly right. Can you offer, I don't know what, financial incentives to get people to move to smaller and more remote places in this province?
I think that when we look at incentives, we have to be very careful around inviting people to our community. I think one of the things we need to focus on, first of all, is the integration into the community. And if we offer incentives, are those incentives being spread around everyone? So what I'm saying is, we talk about workforce development. If we invite an employer to look at our immigrant population as a possible solution to their workforce needs, we have lots of needs in the 4-county region that we serve. But when we talk to employers about the immigrant population, we also have to make sure that what we're offering the immigrant population is also the same offering that we're making for other people looking for work in the community. And what I mean by that is, if I go to an employer and say, can you consider this immigrant, or this immigrant person, Gemma, is coming into your community, the treatment, the orientation into work, all of what's happening in the workplace must be similar to what everyone else is getting. And the reason I see it that way is that if we don't do that, we immediately create a divide in that workplace. And that's the last thing we want. Integration is about us getting along, working together, not just getting along, working together alongside each other, and really focusing on the advantages that each of us bring.
Wayne, let me get you to follow up in this regard, because these things are always tricky. You know, if you offer, let's say, a 5 or 10 year property tax holiday to some new family that comes in and sets up, I mean, the neighbors may not be thrilled about the fact that they're paying property taxes and the other new folks are not. What do you do about that?
Well, I think you're right. I think the notion of providing those kinds of incentives is really challenging, but what you can do are institute programs that help people to feel more comfortable, to help them become more adapted within the community. English as a second language was mentioned earlier as an example. And I think there are other things that municipalities are doing to try to attract people and provide a range of services that make people feel comfortable. I think people really want to, if we remember that globally, roughly half of the population of the world is rural. Many people come to Canada, they end up in large urban centres, but I think they really would aspire to be in a rural community if we could tell them the story.
Because we're not like that, right? We're what, 85%
Yeah,
urban in this
80,
country?
85% urban, that's right.
I'd like to add, though, that when we offer services as an immigrant, I don't want to go to a special place to receive those services. What I want to do is if I'm looking for employment and this service is offered, I want to be able to go to that employment service that everyone else in our community will go to. I think particularly in a community where I may be the only person of color or there will be fewer of us. And so when we look at diversity, we want to make sure that that diversity is not highlighted and we're segregating services. We want to make sure that it's not in isolation, it is a part of what we're already doing in the community. And I think that will be a key challenge for us as we look at how do we integrate people. I always describe integration and welcoming as two different things. Welcoming, I say to you, Steve, it's really nice to meet you. Welcome to our community. If you need anything, let me know. However, integration is very different. It's about, Steve, it's great to meet you. Welcome to our community. Now, where would you like to be, who would you like to be introduced to? And, this is what we do as volunteers in our community. Where would you like to fit in? It's an invitation almost immediately to be a part of the community, as opposed to when I'm ready, I will request to be a part of the community. And that was the difference. When we moved into Teeswater, our immediate neighbors, that's exactly what they did. They said, this is what this community does. How would you like to participate? And it was the most incredible experience we've had. And when our daughter went away to BC for school, she said, Mom and Dad, you know what I'm going to miss the most? And it was that volunteer experience that she's been doing since she was 8 years old is the first thing. I said, you didn't miss your mom and dad, but, but it was that first experience that she had as a young person moving into a community and being integrated. Integration is very different than welcoming.
Well, let me ask the Mayor of Sault Ste. Marie about that. How well are you doing or not well are you doing at that effort up there?
Yeah, it's really nice to hear Gemma make that distinction and talk about her experiences, because I'm really proud of a lot of the good work that our LIP, our Local Immigration Partnership, has done in the Sault, but also the Sault Community Career Center. They're doing exactly what Gemma's suggesting. A lot of the inclusive services that we're offering and services that we're offering to help migrants and newcomers integrate into our community, we're doing that through the Community Career Center. So it's been very positive. We've also had a group of young professionals start Refugee 705, which is a group of locals that are reaching out to and trying to work with and welcome and integrate some of our newcomers. And we have, on top of Refugee 705, Global Friends. And a lot of this has been organic. The nice thing is a lot of this has grown up in the community outside of political influence or political urging. It's happened naturally, and there's been a tremendous amount of political support for it. So you're seeing this, and I think what I've noticed is that our young people are leading. And I think a lot of what you're going to see in Northern Ontario and in the regional communities is the young people lead, and the young people really affect this change. And I think once we are able to make our story in a compelling way, and people realize that they have the opportunity in Northern Ontario, I think you can see a lot more integration and a lot more positive experiences. So it's happening. There's certainly more work to do. There's always more work to do. Municipalities don't have a lot of levers. One thing I think we can do is really try and embrace technology better than we are now. Technology is making it so that people can live anywhere and work anywhere. I've met some young professionals in the Sault that are entrepreneurs that are working for very large companies, and they're software developers, and they work out of their home in Sault Ste. Marie for these large companies.
You need bigger bandwidth for that, Mr. Mayor, don't you?
We are looking at exactly those type of things. We have some pretty good infrastructure in Sault Ste. Marie for bandwidth, and we have really good redundancy in Sault Ste. Marie because we have access to both sides of the border. But those are exactly, Steve, my point is we are as a community right now asking what kind of, how big can we think, and what kind of technology do we have to embrace so we help break down these borders and help people move more easily and live frankly where they want and not have those employment barriers. Right. I think employment barriers are following, and I think that's an opportunity for Northern Ontario.
We should just confirm for the record, 705 you referred to as the area code there. I presume that's why the
that's right.
Thing is called
Refugee 705, 705 is our area code.
Perfect. Charles.
So you were talking about incentives for people to come to northern rural communities. So how's about this for an incentive? If I told you that as a young person under 24, you're more likely to get a job in Northern Ontario than in Southern Ontario? Or how's about this for an incentive? If I told you that in many career paths, you can actually make more money working in Northern Ontario doing the exact same job. One of my favorite data sources is the job vacancy and wage survey that StatsCan puts out. If you take a look at that, if you're looking for your career path, if you're a professional nurse, on average you make more in Northern Ontario than in Southern Ontario. If you're in the health support services, so personal support workers, those types, you make more money in Northern Ontario than you do in Southern Ontario. If you're office administration or secretarial support or office managers, you make more money in Northern Ontario than you do in Southern Ontario. How's that for an incentive to move?
Well, how about this? Let me be devil's advocate here. Gas costs more. Food costs more. It's further away from
Gas
the Air
costs
Canada
marginally
Centre.
more. Food, for the most part, remarkably, is pretty close to the cost. So the CPI in communities like Thunder Bay, Sudbury, the urban centres that we have, is reasonably close to Toronto. It's actually not that much more expensive. And remember, housing is one-third the cost. One-third the cost.
Tell me about, there's a couple of towns I read about in Winkler and Morden, Manitoba, who are doing some different things as well to try to solve this problem. What are they up to?
So now you're talking about what the federal government or the provincial government, and I'm a policy wonk, so I love you for going here. This is the one single change that the provincial and federal government, one or the other, they don't need a partnership, either one of them can do it on their own, and it's called a nominee program. And what Manitoba did was they were very smart, accidentally I suspect, but they were very smart. About 20 years ago, maybe 25 now, the federal government said to the various provinces, listen, we've got big, long queues to get into Canada. How about we give you guys a side entrance? How many do you want so that you can get them in accelerated entry? Manitoba said 15,000. Ontario at the time said 1,500, if I'm remembering correctly. They're nodding, so I'm going to go with that number. And what Manitoba then did, after they had 15,000, which was huge compared to everybody else, they said, not only are we going to have 15,000 for the province, we're going to separate it down. We're going to allow communities like Morden, Manitoba to pick 25, 50, 100 people off the list. Who do you need in Morden? What jobs do you have right now that you cannot fill? Now you go to the list that Canada has already screened, already approved, and you pick them off the list. And Morden has grown exponentially as a result of that. What we need in Northern Ontario is an immigration nominee program targeted specifically to our region.
Why don't we do that here?
I would agree that that would be something that would fit. I think about, we've been talking a lot about our refugee immigrants, but we have got quite a number of people that come in on the skilled worker program. And they're coming in with skills, they're coming in with resources. We need to be able to integrate those skills into our labour market quickly. We have a lot of people that have come in with skills and abilities that we're not actually tapping into. They're underemployed. And so when we look at them as a possible attraction to our rural communities, what are we offering? For the first reason I'm going to move to a community is for a job. Unless I'm looking to retire. But most people, we're looking for people that are looking for work. And so we need to really be specific around the skills that we need, not necessarily the titles of the jobs, but the skills that we need in our community, and start tapping into the skills that are coming in because we're not using it effectively.
If I might, I think the example from Manitoba is an excellent example to reflect on. Not only was there policy occurring at the federal and provincial level, but the municipalities bonded together and worked really cooperatively. And we don't see that example happening as much as we could and should. And I think that example of working together, the partnerships, the collaboration that can happen is really powerful in that instance.
Can we say to new immigrants, though, yes, by all means, if you want to come in the side door, as Charles put it, we welcome you, but you got to move to Timmins, and you got to stay there for however long a period of time. Can we do that?
It's hard, isn't it? Because I think immigrants, just as the rest of us, have democratic principles of being able to live where you choose to live. But I think it's showing people the opportunities that exist. And if you can do that, then I think there are good decisions that people will make.
Yeah, I think we worry too much about what's going to happen next. Yeah. What's going to happen 2 months, 5 years from then. You know what? If it's a job and it fits for that person and it allows them to sustain their family, they'll stay. And in Morden, you're seeing that. Their retention level compared to the rest of us is considerably higher because what they've done is they found people who want a particular type of lifestyle and a particular type of job, and they've found it and matched it to them, and they've worked very hard to make it about the person coming here, not the community who needs them.
Gotcha. I got about a minute left here. I want to put this up on the screen. Can we do this here? This is image number one. This is not the first time we've been down this road as a country, everybody. In the 1890s, our governments worked to convince Europeans to settle and develop our rural areas. And that was one of the ads that certainly people from places like Ukraine would have seen all those years ago. Any lessons, Gemma, that you think we can learn from that effort at the turn of the previous century that we could apply today?
I think that, yes, I do think that there are lessons. If we, you asked the question before about is it okay to do that? As an immigrant, when I moved, it was opportunity. The number one reason was opportunity, and not opportunity to travel or anything like that. It was about opportunity for a bright future. And if it meant me being a nanny at first and then weaving my way through a career path, then that's what I wanted to do. And so if you said to me, this is where your opportunity exists, absolutely, that's where I would go. And then I would just maneuver where else I wanted to go once I got settled in. So I think, offering an opportunity, first of all, where people can be self-sufficient and and see the success that they're achieving will be successful in any region.
I'm afraid that's our time, friends, but I'm so glad we solved this problem for Northern and Rural Ontario tonight. Can I thank all of our guests on the program tonight? Christian Provenzano, the Mayor of Sault Ste. Marie, Your Worship, good to have you on TVO tonight. Wayne Caldwell from the University of Guelph, Gemma Mendez-Smith from the Four-County Labour Market Planning Board, and Teeswater, Ontario, very good. And Charles Sirtwell, good to have you back from the Northern Policy Institute as well. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.